Thank you very much. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you today. To Paul McClintock, the CEDA National Chairman, Hamilton Calder, CEDA Acting Chief Executive. As I say, it's a real pleasure to be here today. The focus of this year's event, New Thinking for New Challenges, is absolutely right for our times. As a nation, we are facing new challenges, so as a government, we must demonstrate new thinking. Developing regional Australia is critical to that new thinking. To not just pay lip service to, but to actually acknowledge through policies and through budget measures that Australia's regions drive our national economy and are fundamental to the functioning of our cities and the nation. The statistics speak for themselves. Nearly 8 million people live outside our capital cities. In 2016, our agriculture, forestry and fishing and mining industries, all predominantly located in regional Australia, made up 57% of Australia's merchandise exports. Around 45 cents of every tourism dollar is spent in regional areas. Regional Australia supplies the water, gas and electricity that powers our households. As a regional Australian, I see amazing things happening all the time in rural, regional and remote Australia. But regional Australia isn't important to people like me, just like me. Every Australian owes his or her lifestyle to regional Australia. But I'd be confident in saying that most people living in the cities have no idea just how dependent they are on their regions. From the milk on their breakfast cereal to the meat and veggies for dinner, followed by the cream on dessert, as well as the gas that cooks that dinner, the water for showering, and most of the materials that built their homes. Given all this, it's impossible to discuss economic development in Australia without discussing the regions. And it's even more impossible to drive national economic development without investing in our regions. Regional Australia is critical to the Turnbull-Joyce government's plan for economic growth to secure more and better paying jobs that will encourage investment, facilitate innovation and provide vital infrastructure. I don't want to give the impression that things are perfect in every region. The recent Productivity Commission report into regional economies found 80% of our regions are doing very well, though while 20% do face challenges. If you only read the media, you might think only bad things happen in regional Australia, but there are endless opportunities. This year's federal budget includes substantial investments aimed at harnessing those opportunities. Connectivity, to better connect our cities and regions and to grow the economy, is at the heart of the infrastructure investments. We are investing $75 billion over the next decade to fund and finance critical airport, road and rail infrastructure projects. A centrepiece of the budget is a once-in-a-generation $20 billion commitment to upgrade Australia's passenger and freight rail to better connect people to jobs and services and get goods to market. In one of the biggest investments ever seen in regional Australia, we are funding the Melbourne to Brisbane Inland Rail with an additional $8.4 billion. Many have talked about this for a long time, as long as I can remember, but it's this coalition government that's actually building it. By 2025, this nationally significant freight transport project will better connect our regions to domestic and global markets to take advantage of the tremendous opportunities offered in Asia and beyond. As part of the $20 billion commitment, we've put $10 billion on the table over the next decade for the National Rail Program. A third of this will go to regional Australia. This investment will reduce the burden on our roads, provide more reliable transport networks and support our efforts to decentralise our economy and grow regional Australia. The budget also contained an extra $200 million for the Building Better Regions Fund, bringing the total amount in that fund to almost $500 million, so that more regional communities can grow and drive their own futures. The Building Better Regions Fund invests in infrastructure projects which create jobs as well as economic benefits through its infrastructure stream. It also invests in people and communities by supporting things such as tourism initiatives, local leadership and regional planning through its community investment stream. The fund has seen huge demand for local regional project, evidenced by the record number of applications made under the first round of BBRF, which closed earlier this year, record compared to the previous National Stronger Regions Fund. More than 900 applications, with 545 for the infrastructure stream and 371 for the community investment stream. BBRF invests amounts of up to $10 million in federal government funding per project, with a requirement for matching funding from elsewhere. These infrastructure projects are a really important way for regional communities to upgrade and improve facilities. However, in some regional areas, larger infrastructure is needed to unlock significant potential. The recent budget provides $272 million to fund major projects that will help take advantage of new opportunities and to potentially develop new industries. Under this fund, the Australian Government's minimum contribution will be $10 million, with a requirement for match funding, meaning that these projects will be, at a minimum, $20 million. And the successful applications will require support from all levels of government. The guidelines are currently under development, and it's expected that the funding round will open towards the end of this year. Our $220 million regional jobs and investment packages is another important aspect of regional development, aimed at helping regions stimulate long-term economic growth and deliver sustainable employment. 10 diverse regions have been selected as pilot sites for the RGIP program. Funding packages will be made available through 3 streams: business innovation, local infrastructure, and skills and training. In each region, a local planning committee which will bring together community leaders across a range of sectors to identify the region's strategic priorities. Successful applications will align with the local priorities listed in a local investment plan written by the local planning committee. And I say that 3 times because the whole point was to ensure that these pilot programs were delivered from local knowledge about how they saw their futures planning going forward. This will create a community-driven government investment partnership between local businesses, communities and the Australian Government. This is all capped off with tax cuts for small business, because small business, as many of you, all of you would know, is the backbone of regional economies. Around a quarter of Australia's small businesses are outside the capital cities. In rural, regional and remote Australia, the butchers and bakers, the farmers and stock feed businesses, the corner store and news agents are the lifeblood of our economies. The Coalition Government believes in a better tax system, and we want to reward people for the effort that they put into their business. Under our government, tax rates for small business will continue to reduce. The first instalment of the government's enterprise tax plan will reduce the business tax rate to 27.5% for companies with a turnover of less than $10 million and grow from there. Most businesses in regional Australia will benefit from this. There are so many more good things in the recent budget than for regional development. This is on top of what we're already doing for the regions, such as improving mobile phone black spots and rolling out the NBN, that I unfortunately don't have time to cover in any great detail. But to mention just a few, in response to the National Task Force report, we're providing almost $300 million towards education, prevention, treatment, support and community engagement around ice and other drugs. And over the next decade, there will be an 84% increase in Commonwealth funding for students in regional and remote Australia. I've talked a lot about investing in the regions, and while these investments and initiatives are significant, they don't mean the job of regional development is done. I mentioned earlier that there are huge opportunities in the regions as well as challenges. Our approach to regional development is that one size definitely doesn't fit all, and regional development isn't just about grant programs. Regional development is about lifting the profile of regional Australia and looking at the issues affecting rural, regional and remote Australians across many policy areas. Our regional policy statement, Regions 2030, is a comprehensive plan to unlock those opportunities and give regional cities and rural areas the investment which helps drive our national economy. It recognises that local communities often have better solutions than government, and I say that all the time and I absolutely mean it, and that when communities and government work in partnership, long-lasting and great outcomes can be achieved. Ultimately, it aims to build the kind of sustainable regional communities that our children and our grandchildren either want to stay in or come back to. We know that regional Australians care about the health of their families, the education of their children, the ability to access technology, alongside traditional indicators such as employment and economic growth. So our approach coordinates activities across 5 key areas: jobs and economic development, infrastructure, health, education and communications. When the combination of actions across these 5 areas is right, those who live, work and raise families in the regions are positioned to make the most of their potential. The recent PC report clearly endorses my approach and the Coalition's approach to regional development. The report emphasises that one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work, acknowledges the importance of local leadership and gives the nod to community-led projects being co-funded by different levels of government. Which brings me to the newly established Regional Australia Ministerial Task Force, chaired by the Prime Minister, and I'm the deputy of that task force. And it illustrates our government's absolute commitment to regional Australia. Because as the opportunities and challenges in regional Australia cross many portfolios, a cross-portfolio ministerial task force is the best way to address them. The task force spearheads our whole-of-government approach to developing Australia's regions by working to improve the lives of rural, regional and remote Australians across those 5 key areas that I mentioned. It makes sure that we don't consider issues in silos and that our thinking goes well beyond the next electoral cycle. And then we've got our decentralisation policy, although depending where you were after I announced this, it had different responses. As part of the government's commitment to regional Australia, a structured approach to decentralisation is being developed, starting with a strategic assessment of which departments, agencies and their parts are suitable for decentralisation. This policy is to look at all departments and agencies across Sydney, Melbourne and Canberra, although certain elements seem to have forgotten about Sydney and Melbourne and only report on potential moves from Canberra. There are countless excellent examples of decentralisation over the years. The New South Wales Department of Primary Industries in Orange and the Australian Tax Office in Albury, just to name a couple. Moving government entities to the regions puts more money in our towns, more customers in our shops, more students in our schools and more volunteers in our local fire brigade. It also creates more career opportunities for our young people to enable them to either stay in the communities that they grew up in or move back to those regions, and helps us keep those bright young brains in the bush. Cabinet has agreed on a structured approach to decentralisation, which will result in business cases for potential moves being presented to Cabinet in December. I'm also a strong supporter of corporate decentralisation, and I think it's something we haven't talked nearly enough about over recent years. And the benefits for both the economic development of regions and the companies themselves in terms of cheaper rent, rates and land, and I'm working very closely with the business sector to progress this. There are real opportunities here for corporate decentralisation. We've already seen some huge successes demonstrated by Mars in Albury-Wodonga and Macquarie Bank setting up offices in Orange and also Albury-Wodonga. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again for the opportunity to be here and speak to you this morning. As I've said today, rural, regional and remote Australia is great already, but it can be even greater. To make this happen, the Coalition Government's working through a vast range of new and ongoing initiatives, some of which I've outlined here for you this morning. We're demonstrating new thinking for new challenges. Thank you very much for having me here, and I'm happy to take a few questions.